The Pediatric Lounge, a podcast taking you behind the door of the physician's lounge to get a deeper insight into just what docs are talking about today. From the clinically profound to the wonderfully routine and everything in between. Hi, George, and it's Tuesday afternoon, and this is a special podcast on our innovation series, the Pediatric Moonshot, how AI and cloud computer can improve outcomes for all children. Welcome to our guest hosts, Dr. Sabrina, and our two phenomenal guests today, they are Anthony Chang and Timothy Chow. Dr. Timothy Chow is a pioneer in cloud computer and founder of the Pediatric Moonshot. Dr. Anthony Chang is a distinguished pediatric cardiologist and AI expert with rich educational background from institutions from Johns Hopkins to Georgetown and Stanford. Sabrina, welcome our guests and take it over.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. I'm really excited to have these two leaders in health technology to share with us what they're working on and help us understand, I think, a little bit more about how it applies to our caring for children. So maybe I'll start with a really general question. Dr. Chang, Timothy, can you share a little bit about your journeys and how they converged on the Pediatric Moonshot? Basically, how did you meet?
I was in the middle of my curriculum for my education and data science. And we were at Stanford and we were about to take some electives. And I thought cloud computing was knowledge that's very much related to artificial intelligence with my area of interest that I should learn about. So I took one credit elective with Tim. And as an old school student, I wanted to meet my professor in person, not just on Zoom. He was kind enough to say that we could meet over breakfast in Palo Alto. So that's how we personally met. And I'm really glad I made the trip up to meet him.
Can we even back it up a little bit more? You're a pediatric cardiologist. So how did you end up taking a cloud computing course at Stanford?
Let's
start there.
What are you doing at Stanford? Learning data science. Gosh, this is almost now. I started about 10 years ago, actually the 10th anniversary of my entrance into the curriculum at Stanford on data science. I think you probably know, Sabrina, back then, no one was putting artificial intelligence and healthcare in the same sentence in 2011 or so. So I was inspired by the supercomputer Watson being the human contestant so handily and say that if we just capture some of that resource into healthcare, an amazing resource for us. And I've always been interested in math, and statistics. So it was a natural extension of my knowledge base. When Watson and supercomputer beat human contestants was the night that I downloaded the application for the Stanford program. And to my surprise, 3 days later, the director called me and said, "You're in. I just have a few questions for you." And one of them was, "Why don't you just hire people to do what you want to do in person?" And so I always wanted to know things myself and not just count on other people. And so I was probably the oldest student he ever admitted to that program, but really had an amazing, enlightening education for the next 3 or 4 years in courses like cloud computing that I think very few clinicians will venture into. So I've always said to people around me that you should not be comfortable if you're in the comfort zone because it's such a special richness out there when you venture out of the comfort zone. I would say being in Tim's class felt like I just landed on Pluto. So it was really out of my comfort zone. But it was such a rich learning experience. At the same time, I know I might have mentioned it, Tim, I was taking a course called Emerging Technologies, which is from the computer science department. So it was a really wonderful journey into what technology is available to potentially be deployed.
Tim, you're not a physician. So how did you end up, you're an expert in cloud computing, right? So maybe you can help us understand a little bit more about what that actually means and how you came to connect with Anthony when he was in your class about a healthcare issue and particularly a pediatric healthcare issue.
Yeah, so I'll pick up the story from, so Anthony Yeah, I get this email. I'd like to meet the professor. I went, that's old school. We meet for breakfast. I'm sitting there and Anthony shows up. I'm thinking, this doesn't look like a regular student, right? I proceed to learn that he has an MD, an MPH, an MBA. He's chief of pediatric cardiology at the Children's Hospital of Orange County. And I'm looking at him going, why are you talking to me? Like, I don't know anything about what you know about. And so, as you've already heard, clearly why he was on campus and his bravery at taking a class like this. And then I think, as all of the people who know Anthony, he's very inclusive. And so he basically, I like to say, he opened a portal into their world, your world, the world of pediatric medicine, which I had no clue about any of it. And I learned things like, and Anthony tells a story of a little girl he's providing consulting for in Myanmar that sadly they couldn't share images with him. And the outcome was not a wonderful outcome. And I've since gone on to learn that, oh, this is not just about Myanmar. We're working with Howard Memorial in Willits, California, population 5,000, 4 hours north of San Francisco. And to this very day, they use CD-ROMs in an emergency situation when they transfer the kid to either Stanford UCSF, Shriners Burn Unit, or UC Davis. And a waste of time, energy, money. And they've even, because the system of a CD-ROM, sometimes the CD-ROM never even makes it on the air taxi. They tell me they've actually driven the 4.5 hours from Willits to UCSF. It's crazy, right? On the one hand, I learned that. And from being adopted by the community, I learned things like, oh, there's a condition called focal cortical dysplasia, which is a brain lesion, which if left untreated, the kid has epileptic seizures. There's a kid in Florida that he's 18 years old now. For the past 12 years, he's had seizures every 2 to 3 times a day. At night, he wakes up screaming. And he was MRI imaged very early. They didn't see anything. I've now seen these MRI images and I go, I don't know how anybody figures this out. And so they put him on a whole course of drugs, none of them effective, some of them way too expensive. They were getting ready to put in electrical implants and they re-imaged him and they said, it really looks like he has FCD. And if that is the case, they can go in, surgically remove the lesion, and the kid's cured for life. So now the good news is there's only 2,500 of these cases a year in the United States. But the bad news is no one neuroradiologist sees enough of these cases, right? And so obviously with the power of AI, meaning deep learning, when I use the word AI, meaning neural networks, if I could access all the images in all the MRI machines, we could build a focal cortical dysplasia application, which would be accurate and deployable on every MRI machine in the world. So all of this conspired to create a COVID project. I didn't think about it this way. As COVID is descending on us, I'm thinking about all of these problems that Anthony has shared with me and the community. And I'm thinking, God, we could solve this, right? They're all the same problem. And so that is the genesis of the Moonshot, which is to reduce healthcare inequity, lower cost, and improve patient outcomes for kids locally, rurally, and globally. How are we going to do this? By creating privacy-preserving, real-time applications based on access to data in all 1 million healthcare machines in all 500 children's hospitals in the world.
That's a moonshot in itself.
It is aptly named. It is aptly
That's a
named.
moonshot. We just got, we had this child that had a cardiac problem, a disaster case at a big children's hospital. So we needed to get the medical records. I am not exaggerating. It's sitting on my desk. It's 12, 13 inches thick. It must have cost $100 to mail over. It was so heavy. Nobody can look at that. You're talking about CD-ROMs. We're talking about paper. There's so many we can't even scan.
Ironic thing is, I'm a pediatric cardiologist. I probably only need 3 pages out of that 12-inch.
When I gave it to the doctor that actually saw this patient and sent him to the cardiologist, she said, "Isn't there a discharge summary in there?" No. Discharge summary. That's all you need is 2-3 pages of why the kid ended up with the disaster that he had with amputated legs.
I was very inspired by the book Business at the Speed of Thought, written by Bill Gates, probably around 1990. I think it was around 1990. And why can't we have medicine at the speed of thought, right? So I should be able to look at an image from Orange County that's done in Myanmar and be able to tell the doctors right there, right away, what I'm seeing and what I'm how I'm interpreting that image to be, and help that child even though I'm like 10,000 miles away. So that, to me, that seems so logical and so doable. So that's why when Tim and I started talking, I said, is this possible to be this? And on top of that, we add AI on top of all this to even more about. So I will not rest. I tell Tim, I will not rest until this,
So help us unpack that a little bit. So what is the technology that's required to accomplish this, and how does it work?
Yeah. So I stated the mission, right? We want to create privacy-preserving, real-time applications based on access to data in all 1 million healthcare machines. And when I say healthcare machine, I mean everything CT, MRI, ultrasound, blood analyzer, gene sequencer, ventilator, et cetera. Okay. So how are we going to go do this? And so as the analogy holds, we felt like we need to build a new rocket to get to the moon. And so we develop a technology we call an edge cloud or an in-the-building cloud service. So the cloud servers, just to make this really simple, when people talk about cloud computing and AWS or Amazon Azure, what they are saying is that, and this is the first day of class, I go, what is Amazon doing? They're getting a whole bunch of computers, they're managing them, they're locating them in about 10 data centers in the world. Okay, that's Amazon, Google, all these guys. What are we doing? We, meaning Bevel Cloud, owns the intellectual property for the edge cloud, getting a whole bunch of computers, managing it. We just figure out how to put it in 10,000 data centers in the world or in every one of the 500 children's hospitals. Now, why does the server need to be in the building, right? It has to be in the building because the only way you can talk, and I'll just pick on ultrasound because obviously we started in cardiology. The only way you can talk to the ultrasound and get the data from the ultrasound is you have to be on the network with the ultrasound, meaning you have to be in the building with the ultrasound. So we developed the technology. You can imagine the first conversations we had with IT ended with NFW, which is a very technical term.
We won't ask you to explain what that term means.
But the team I assemble is a bunch of infrastructure engineers. We've been at this many times. And we're like, okay, we know we need to engineer security and privacy into this on day one. We engineered over 30 security features. One of the core team members is a former student who has 15 years of privacy law experience. So we engineered these edge servers to enable ourselves to put them in the building and what we referred to as twin the machine to the edge server. So now, and just because some of your listeners probably know how some of this works, now every time the stenographer or whatever decides that they're going to send an image to the PAC system, our servers get the identical image. And just to make a point of it for some people who care, this is all non-compressed, et cetera. So now you have the image. The question is, what can I do with the image? So this is where we're, in essence, a platform and infrastructure. Some of your listeners may be aware of how the iPhone works. Apple delivered a bunch of infrastructure, meaning phones all around the world. They gave people a development environment with access to a camera and access to GPS information. And they told the world, go build apps. And Uber emerged as an example. Instagram emerged as an example. So we see the world the same way. meaning here's the ultrasound image, go build a cardiology application, go build an orthopedic application, go build an emergency application, right? So what could these applications do? They could share, and we're actually working on this. Obviously, my conversations about emergency rooms, they could share an image in an emergency situation. They could infer. Those of you who speak AI, if I build the AI algorithm, it's called an inferencing engine. It's what the intelligence, the so-called neural nets have been weighted. That's the inferencing engine that when you talk to your phone in Siri, that's what's running there to go, what did Sabrina say? So you can infer on it. So back to my example, the focal cortical dysplasia inferencing engine application could go, hey, Sabrina, this kind of looks like focal cortical dysplasia. So you could do that with it. And then the last part, which is the most important part for AI, is we can't use the techniques that have been used to develop ChatGPT, Alexa, all of the consumer stuff you've seen, which is a centralized approach. They centrally aggregate the data. They centrally train on the data. And so both for the reason of the quantity of data we're talking about for ultrasound, MRI, and this imaging stuff is way bigger than a bunch of text data. So who's going to pay all the networking cost if we decide to locate it in one data center in Ireland or whatever? And then obviously, everybody who's worked in privacy knows if I centralize a whole bunch of data with no purpose, that is not privacy preserving. And those of your listeners who are international probably know that countries like Norway are saying Norwegian data is never leaving Norway. So the last thing as a class of things that you can now do is you can learn on that data locally. There's a whole technique referred to as federated or decentralized learning, where I learn locally, which is exactly what's going on your phone on Siri. Siri's trying to learn about you locally. It's not taking your voice and sending it to the Apple cloud for two reasons: network and privacy preservation. So we believe the same techniques, we've done initial work on this, can be applied to the world of medicine and imaging. And my contention is our work in what we call the Gemini program is a light year ahead of anything even going on in adult medicine. Because this is the key problem to solve at the end of the day, is how do you learn without centralizing the data? Because that's never going to happen.
Yeah. They've been talking about stuff like this with getting people together at ERs and places. God, for as long as I can remember, in 2000, 99 maybe. They still haven't figured it out. They want to use little credit cards to carry your portable wallet, your medical records. I don't know, there's all too many computer systems. There's nothing uniform.
That's what we're building, a uniform global infrastructure.
So let me ask you a little bit, just because I'm having trouble grasping the concept.
Go.
You're putting a server in each institution, and just pick anyone, Stanford.
Yep.
One rare disease on a MRI, one time out of every million. How is that helping Miami Nicholas Children's, who has its own server that sees that case 1 in a million? Because the real power would be if the 500 hospitals across the country, the world, we're sharing that data so that now there is 700, 800, 1,000 events of that one abnormal CT scan. So how do you bridge that?
So that's why the mission is 1 million machines in all 500 children's hospitals. So what that means is that every machine in all 500 children's hospitals, including Nicholas and Stanford, and I'm just going to stick with imaging for right now, all the imaging machines are twinned to an edge server. So now I can share images by what I just described. I could infer on the image, or in my focal cortical dysplasia example, I could learn on every MRI image in all 500 children's hospitals.
Okay, so where I got confused is this data, the servers are segregated to their institution. Where does that sharing of the data from all the 500 institutions come together for us to learn about these rare diseases?
Okay, let's just stay with your example. So the MRI machine or the MRI machines at Nicholas, each of them is twinned to an edge server. The MRI machines at Chalk are twinned to the edge servers. Okay, so that's the fundamental infrastructure.
Yes.
Now the MRI image that has been done this morning at 9 a.m., software, an application on the edge server will go, oh, let me see if I can learn on this image. This is so-called federated learning to determine whether or not this is focal cortical dysplasia. Oh, this is what I learned. And what that means technically is these are the neural network weights, which technically is a bunch of floating point numbers that I learned on that image. I will then aggregate centrally,
Right.
the learnings from each of these machines and then go, oh, I think I know the next generation of my focal cortical dysplasia algorithm. And now I'm going to deploy that to both the MRI machines at Nicholas and the MRI machines at Chow. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you are, in a way, taking away the patient identifiers, just using the numbers that the machines saw in each institution, aggregating the data, and then feeding it back to them. And then someone could say, I'm interested in this very rare disease, and I'm going to build an app that goes on this system to diagnose this cortical dysplasia. Okay. And
Exactly.
then that reaches one of the big concerns that we have in pediatrics, which is we could start with ChatGPT. It's trash. Sorry, I insulted a lot of people. It's trash.
Tell us what you really think, Herb.
Because the data set that's there is whatever's available in the internet, and nobody curates any content on the internet.
Yep.
The next one, which is much better, which the radiologists are way far ahead of anybody else in medicine, is when you have selected data sets that are validated. And the concern in the pediatric community is that because the sickest and the majority of the patients and the majority of the population is adult, and disease processes are very different in children than they are in adults, then we need, for there to be real learning, machine learning, we need data sets that are specific to children. So you're breaching that divide by going to where those data sets are created, which is a children's hospital.
Amen.
And
So
we
that's
need
interesting.
volume, correct?
I think he's starting with the children to expand it to the adults later, which is
No,
if you want to
he's focused on the children.
right.
Because we need that separate data set that is just pediatric focused. We can't I can Google anything I want or put it on ChatGPT. I could get Anthony Fauci talking about COVID, or I could get some nut talking about COVID. And you just don't know if you don't know. I have to be a physician to understand what is legitimate and what's illegitimate information. And so the only way to guard against that is to have very curated data sets that are legitimate where the machine learns. And that's what they're doing.
And you need large data sets, right? Which is why you need all of the participation of all the children's hospitals. Can you talk about that a little bit, Timothy?
Yeah, I don't think this is a curious question. Nobody, even in adult imaging, by the way, there was just a recent New England Journal of Medicine article written by Matt Lundgren and Panayavit over at Harvard about the state of the art of AI in medical imaging, adult imaging. And basically, the statement is it doesn't work very well. And the reason why it doesn't work very well is the data sets been trained on are very small, right? Because what has happened historically has been, oh, I'm a researcher at Lurie's Children's. I'll go get my Lurie's data. I'll build an algorithm. I'll demonstrate a beautiful rock curve. I'll write my paper and we're done. And as soon as you try to deploy this into the real world, it doesn't work very well. So to answer the question of how much data, I don't think any of us actually know the answer, but we're building an infrastructure that says it could be all the data.
Yeah.
So at some point, we know. Gemini, our first stopping point is 32 institutions, all imaging machines twinned, which will result in about 2,000 edge servers out there and lots of terabytes of data, way more than has ever been accumulated by NIH or anybody.
Now I'm going to
Is that enough? I don't know.
let me
Right.
ask you, let me put my MBA hat on, my MD MBA hat on.
Go, George.
Sounds really cool. It probably sounds medically probably a good thing. But my favorite question, Sabrina, who's going to pay for it and how are you going to make any money on it?
Yeah, George. So you were drifting off over here anyway. So let me talk about this. I came out of retirement to work on this.
Yeah.
Pediatric Moonshot. We know that this technology could apply to adult medicine. By the way, we built this technology so we could twin agricultural equipment. It has pervasive capability way beyond even medicine, right? But I'm not taking my eye off the ball. Anthony just said it in his way. We want to solve the pediatric problem, okay? So I've been funding our efforts for the past 3 years.
Very nice of you.
I felt like it was an important use of time, resource, talent, capability, and it was an important thing to go do.
Yeah.
Our next step, we've estimated $112 million, okay? Unfortunately, that's a little bit beyond my pocketbook. So,
George can help you with that.
George, okay, George. Yeah, I'll send you my my ACH account, okay? So we said, okay, are we going to go to venture capital? NFW? They don't care about pediatric medicine. I mean,
does, but
nobody does. Okay. Nobody does. Oh, let's go to the children's hospitals. They don't have a whole lot of money.
No.
And by the way, just to make a point of it, we are building a network if it's not clear. We're building a network. And any one node in the network, why do they care? If I had said, oh, I'm going to go to Home Depot, would you like an internet? Home Depot would have said, who else is on the internet? Nobody. Why do I want an internet? So the US government, I don't know if you guys know the history of this, under the aegis of ARPA, was created the foundation of the internet, right? Government sponsorship. So number one, government sponsorship. So we're engaged over at the new ARPA H you guys may have heard of. We're talking to folks at HHS. I'm actually getting introduced to the folks at U.S. Department of Agriculture, because this is very interesting. I always say to people, what we're working on, if your mom works for Google and you live in Palo Alto, it'll make some difference. But what we're really trying to do is solve the problem of the kid that mom does not work at Google and lives in a rural county in America where 60% of those counties have zero pediatric expertise, no specialists, nothing. And by the way, those rural communities are the same as our farming communities. So the issues of healthcare inequity or healthcare equity, the issues of agriculture, and the issues of national security are actually intertwined, which is why USDA. So government, US, we've had early conversations over in the EU. I've had early conversations with the government of Singapore because it makes sense that governments should be able to fund infrastructure, right?
Yeah.
Are you getting resistance from children's hospitals in terms of data sharing? Are they feeling proprietary about their data?
No, that's not, I don't believe that's our issue anymore. We've demonstrated enough. We've deployed, just to be clear, edge zones at 8 children's hospitals on 3 continents. Mm-hmm. So we've been through security reviews, DPIAs, BS left and right. That's not the issue, in my opinion, anymore. It's really taking the next step of building out this infrastructure at scale, which is really when we talk about Mercury and Gemini, it's really to take that step and to not ask the children's hospitals for the money to go do that. And in fact, just to be even more clear about it, to fund the time of the clinicians who will participate in Gemini. God bless all of you are medical people. I'm just impressed that people are willing to spend time with me before they have to go to clinic or in the evening after they come back from clinic to help push this ball forward. But all you guys have real jobs. And if we just continue to depend on volunteer effort by Anthony or Sabrina or George, we can't get from here to there. So when I'm talking about the 112 million, it's not only about infrastructure, it's about being able to pay for the time so our clinical neuroradiologists can actually work on this. So no, I think it's all at this point about funding. I said one axis is government, the other axis is corporate. And corporate's where I live and breathe. So yeah, I'll just tell you a quick story. My friends at Juniper Networks, I said to them, I go, guys, you spent $5 million to put a Juniper Networks logo on a Formula One race car. I go, come on. I think you could do something more valuable with your money than putting a logo on a Formula One race car.
Well, maybe they should put a logo
they like that
on the podcast.
Yeah. We'll take their Juniper logo.
So let me go back to where we are at right now.
Yep.
So radiology is within medicine at the forefront of this. It's driven by money because our radiology companies that see a payout by allowing, I don't know what a neuroradiologist reads, 100 MRIs a day. If they can get them to 200, then they're much more productive. They make money. Someone's going to pay for them. And that's where the cutting edge is right. When I talked to my friends who are neuroradiologists, we actually had a show with a neuroradiologist and Dr. Wixom from MIT, a data business scientist there. One of the things that came out is that even with large data sets, they're having problems with the machine learning, because one of the problems that they describe is the machine learns to expect certain things. So when they're doing CT scans of the chest for patients with lung cancer, they do serial CT scans to see if it's progressing or not. And sometimes the machine will see what it thinks it should expect on the 5th or 7th or 10th CT scan. And that's where the real radiologist comes into play and say, no, that didn't progress. It's not there. And then they got to go back and reprogram it. And when you talk to the practicing neuroradiologists, they go, a good CT scan or MRI tech will tell you when somebody's having a stroke right in there on the table, because they can pick that out because they see it so often. I don't need a piece of software to bring that to the top of the queue so that I'm more effective and improve quality. Both valid things. Where I do see it, for example, and I'm very optimistic, or what is the word that they use up there in Palo Alto when you are high on some stock?
Bullish?
Bullish. I'm very bullish on this, and it's bedside ultrasound, because bedside ultrasound does allow virtually anybody. You can talk about rural America, you can talk Africa, you can talk a small town in rural Costa Rica. It's handheld. It's not extremely expensive. What's that?
Oh, he just got a phone.
I'm a telemarketer.
The problem with bedside ultrasound is that we don't have enough training. Physicians don't have enough training. And it's a steep learning curve, and more so in pediatrics.
And my question about bedside ultrasound is, it sounds to me because you don't have standardized images, that it's harder to apply any sort of machine learning to that. Is that fair to say?
Probably is, but if you think about it, even the EKGs, how long have EKGs been going around? They're read, yet we still have to get a cardiologist to read it. Because they're always wrong.
I like to hear what Tim thinks about this, right? Because that's a great case use, I think. If somebody like Butterfly gave you all the data and you can apply machine learning so that if I'm in my office in Northern Virginia and I look at a chest of a kid and I miss a pneumonia reading, the AI is telling me you should look at this twice because it looks like it's showing pneumonia. And that will accelerate adoption of this bedside ultrasound, because now I'm confident that I'm not going to misdiagnose somebody. Is that something that's possible, or is that just a dream in my head?
No, let me be clear. We have, as you probably have heard, we are coming from the infrastructure up. Or as my friend Dr. Wyman Lai says, you build the roads, I'll drive the cars on it. So we've already, Herb, to your question or your point, we've already twinned a portable Lumify ultrasound to the edge servers.
Okay.
So now every portable Lumify, every Epic 7, right, an application will in a consistent way get the data. Now, back to what are you going to do with the data? You could say, yeah, I'm looking at the image and go, turn the probe the other way or whatever. This is now left in the domain, which is why I said these two things, which Anthony has been working on a lot, which is the bringing the clinical community and the AI community together with the ability to get to this data in a privacy-preserving, real-time way. Then we can create everything you just talked about, Herb.
So you're creating the roads, and then somebody else. You're creating the ecosystem. When the Apple analogy, you're creating the garden.
Yep.
With the safe rails, where
Well,
privacy,
yeah,
where privacy is very important,
Privacy is preserved.
and where
I
the
think
data set is pediatric focused.
yes.
And your
Yes.
point is a good one, Herb, about bringing the use cases to the primary care setting. How does this impact the patients that we're treating? And so the things that I've heard, and correct me if I'm wrong or add some, but one of them is improving the diagnostic accuracy of anything that we might do. So for instance, if we're going to use a bedside ultrasound or a handheld ultrasound, ultimately, it could help us generate more useful diagnostic images, which then can be used to train a system to provide access to specialty diagnostics when we wouldn't ordinarily have them. So in rural settings, in developing countries, correct? In addition to portability of our data, of our image data, correct? To me, those feel like the two big use cases from the provider perspective. Are there others that you're thinking about?
No, I'll say our two focuses have been what we call the Mercury program, which is simple image sharing for emergency medicine and related second opinion. And then the Gemini program to really figure out how we use decentralized learning, right, to create accurate, privacy-preserving AI algorithms. Those are the two big categories we're going down. There's a whole bunch, once you start looking at this, and there's a whole bunch of stuff beyond this. I'll give you an example. In our vision of the world, every machine in the hospital is twinned. You can now think about communicating between machines. What if I had the data from the blood analyzer and the gene sequencer and the CT scanner and the EMR? What could I do? I don't know the answer.
Like the Terminator.
Yeah. We are building Skynet, George. We are building Skynet.
Like
so,
Skynet.
Yeah, we are building Skynet.
But that went down?
Yeah. I think much like the Apple analogy, I don't think when Apple came out, anybody imagined Uber. I don't think anybody imagined Instagram, right? These were emergent out of the capability. I can't possibly predict what people are going to do, but I think we're building the road that will enable people to do what Anthony's been dreaming about for 10 years now. We can turn it into actuality. And I think the important point, which, when Anthony talked about at the speed of thought, the one thing that I think people don't comprehend is software is so different than pharma and devices and whatnot. Literally, if I can imagine it, I can create it. And I think we need to bring medicine over into the world. I spend time with the Masters in Translational Medicine program at Chow. All of their work is devices, things, and pharma. And I go, guys, come on, right? Software, if you think about software, it actually has zero cost to build and zero cost to deliver. What the hell looks like that?
Why is it so expensive?
It's purely your imagination that is the controlling factor. How do you imagine Uber, or how do you imagine Instagram, or how you imagine the future of orthopedics or any of these domains? It's just limited by that. And I think if we can encourage the community, and I know Anthony's doing a lot to encourage the community to start reorienting their thinking around software and what we can do with it, we can move at the speed of thought. We can take the ideas that Herb probably has in his head and translate them into reality. And back to my example, once Uber existed, it could exist on every phone all across the world. That's the same idea here. Herb comes up with a cool new idea. We instantiate in software. It can now be deployed all across the planet.
So I know this is something that Anthony talks a lot about, and you're a major champion for the application of AI to healthcare. And we had the chance to connect at the AAP NCE, where you received an award. And I remember very clearly you making a comment in your acceptance speech about how important it is for providers to begin to engage with AI and with technology, because we can think about it as bolstering our weaknesses. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about what you meant by that and how we as providers can be thinking about the risks and the benefits of bringing AI into our work.
Yeah, I think most clinicians haven't learned either in medical school or during the life afterward about resources like artificial intelligence. So I think once you learn about the capabilities, you can see how this is immensely useful practice on a patient-to-patient basis. And I don't just talk the talk, because I use a large language model in my clinic, and I use it just about hourly. And I think it makes me a more knowledgeable clinician about perhaps areas that I'm no longer well indoctrinated in because of the sheer volume of the amount of medical knowledge that's out there. Medical knowledge is doubling probably every 50 days or so. So there's no humanly possible way that any clinician, everything they need to learn about their field, just because of the sheer volume. AI is just like the large language models like ChatGPT are so particularly good at closing that gap in terms of the human cognition, information that's out there. So I think, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, can you share more about how you use that large language model in your practice? And then areas that you might be cognizant of being careful, right? So where are the holes? Where are the possible risks when you use it?
I ultimately will have the final say in terms of managing a patient. So I don't feel like I'm being exposed to risks. If anything, I see a deficiency. I don't use it. I think I just wrote a list of 10 predictions without making healthcare this year.
Anthony,
Scoot
move closer
closer.
to the microphone.
I just finished a piece on 10 predictions for AI and healthcare for this year. And one of my predictions is getting a little bit of attention is that I predict that this year a health system will get sued in a medical legal suit for not deploying AI tools, which is a foreign concept to a lot of people. A lot of people are thinking you might get sued if you use AI at negative outcome and sues, but I think it's much easier to prove that you didn't use a tool that's available and a patient had a bad outcome. So I think that's going to come this year or next within 12 to 24 months. Because I think enough hospitals have adopted some of the tools that are available now for approach now standard of practice, which is defined as more than 50% of the community using a certain tool or a certain line of thinking. So I think, unfortunately, we're going to get a stick along with the carrots without AI. And perhaps we need both to really reach a wide-scale adoption of AI healthcare. So I'm just actually preparing a talk I'm giving tomorrow, and they wanted something a little bit controversial, which is never a problem for me, but the title is going to be Why AI Will Not Save Healthcare. And because I think we need a wake-up call that the technology is already pretty mature. Even people in the AI domain feel like it's maturing faster than they ever imagined. And I think the distance between the trajectory on the technology and the way we practice widening feels like by the month. So I think you really need to have a wake-up call about missing an opportunity that is really tremendous asset for our practice. And for us that achieve precision medicine, population health feature, it's just not humanly possible to do it without technology support. And most people probably don't know that or don't feel that in their heart and soul because clinicians are so busy. They think just being busier is burdensome, but they don't see it as an opportunity to make their lives easier, patients' outcomes better.
So you feel that AI will help healthcare or will not save healthcare?
Will help healthcare if we allow it to do. My major issue is that sometimes humans need to get out of them. And there's still clinicians, including ones at my hospital, we have probably the first AI-focused institute in the hospital that I know of, 2013. Stanford has one, but it was 27 started. And yet, given the history and everything, given my role as a champion of adopting AI, I have clinicians that literally last month told me that whenever I think my AI tool is ready, he'll be happy to go head to head with it, prove that humans are still smart. You have people talking that way and feeling that way. There's a lot of education. I think the most important, I'm talking with the I'm going to be giving a talk at the this week, Thursday. I think my major takeaway message is not we should start regulating or just start worrying about ethical issues. It's get everyone educated. That should be the number one goal. When not enough people are educated, I'm really afraid that we're going to not give AI the chance to be adopted because she could very slow momentum to get it adopted to the point where it's just not going to happen. I think we have a danger of that. This is not going to be adopted. It's not going to happen.
I'm going to circle back to what you guys talked about a little while. I think, of course, there's tremendous pitfalls or dangers with new technology.
Called Skynet.
Just look at your Tesla with the autopilot. Once in a while, it crashes. It doesn't matter if it's 1 in 10 million if you're the one that dies in the crash. For example, the example that you guys alluded to earlier, you had a complicated kid that lost some limbs, cardiology, complex things. You got a huge medical record. There is no way anyone can read that medical record and summarize it and gather the important data points to give that one individual kid the best care possible. But AI can do it, and it can do it very fast. It can take that 5,000 pages. If it's trained properly, if the information is delivered properly, it can summarize it. It can tell you, this is what the disease process was. These are the complications. These are the things you need to watch out for and monitor in this patient. This is when you need to refer them back to their cardiologist. Yeah. And summarizing that in 30 seconds or 2 minutes allows the clinician to be a better clinician and allows for better outcomes.
I heard the same story when they were introducing the EHRs, by the way.
Remember, the EHRs were a government mandate for accounting, not for clinical work.
The government is starting to get involved in this too, I heard. But anyway, I personally like AI, ChatGPT, and so forth for administrative burdens. I've used it personally I'll write letters to insurance companies about stuff. So I sit down, I put my flight of ideas down on a piece of paper, scrambled all over the place, rewrite this in a professional business-like tone, and it takes it and makes me sound like Shakespeare. It's amazing.
I use it a ton too. I use it as a teaching tool, actually.
Yes.
Just like you would talk to an individual human, you're not going to take their recommendations as data or as research, but it's one person's opinion. And so I find it really helpful to teach me things. Yep. I'm curious, Anthony, are there any particular AI-enabled tools that we as providers should be already using now? Where should we start, I guess is my question. What do we need to be using because it's going to make a difference for our patients?
I think just getting familiar with large language models like ChatGPT, particularly GPT-4, which I find very different than ChatGPT in terms of capability. Just start using it, learn how to do the prompt engineering. It's pretty straightforward. And think of it as your very capable partner to make your life easy with documentation, prior authorization, letters, things like that. And I see that becoming more and more of a physician success. That's not human for change. And I use as I told you, I use a human scribe. I take the best of both worlds. I have a human scribe, and we're starting to put in AI tools into our day-to-day practice. So I think that the best of both worlds is actually a human and some AI. I think accelerate and augment the level of human intelligence you have in a data setting.
That's a very important point. We're getting to the top of the hour. So are there any parting thoughts that you want to share, Anthony?
I think for our audience, just don't be afraid of it. What keeps me up at night is realizing this research not being much more than being concerned about this research creating harm. I see a real big downside of not deploying what's available and what tools are being used already. And also not be afraid to just use it. I think ChatGPT and large language models are a godsend in terms of allowing anyone to be able to use an AI tool in a very relatable and relatively easy way so that it's intimidated by just, some of us remember when desktop computing came out. I was one of the first to get a desktop computer. And everyone was saying it's never going to be disseminated because only people who know how to program it use it. And now we have it in our hands. So I think that the same thing's going to happen with AI, is that it's going to be disseminated and no one's going to absolutely need to learn how to program and I think they did a smart thing with large language models, making it relatable and usable for allergies.
How about you?
Only 1 out of 5 clinicians have used the or native technologies.
Oh. How about you, Tim? Do you have any parting thoughts on that you think is important for the general pediatricians across the U.S. and our listening audience to be aware of?
Yeah, I think what I want to help people think about is the objective here is, we'll say, not to make Anthony smarter. We don't need Anthony's fully capable. What I would counsel people to think about is in Willits, California, in India, in Rwanda, right? There is no expertise, right? The collective expertise you guys have, they don't have anything. So I think the question, at least the way I think about it, is how do we take this technology, this expertise, what we know how to do, and make it available? And software enables it to be made available at dramatically lower costs than humans are made available. We cannot build enough medical schools to solve any problem tomorrow. There's no way to go that direction. And I just think while holding a standard of, can my AI be better than Anthony? I think, yeah, it'd be great, cool, yeah, wonderful. But that's really not at least in my opinion, what this has to do with. It has to do with rural Canada. It has to do with Latin America. It has to do with all of these regions and places where we do not have pediatric cardiologists, oncologists, orthopedics, neuroradiology, none of this. And how do we give these people access and their children access to the same level of care that I get because I can show up at Stanford or at Chow right here? And I think that's where maybe we can let go a little bit of this incredibly high standard that I think people have for, quote, what AI or software needs to do, and think about it practically, which is, how do I help that kid on an Indian reservation in South Dakota?
You're being very generous, but the fact is, in some states in the United States, 60% of the counties don't have a pediatrician.
Exactly.
And I'm talking about Alabama. And you go out to Montana or Utah, there are a lot of counties that don't even have a doctor. They have a nurse practitioner. And so anything that we can do to connect that nurse to an experienced physician somewhere else and spread the wealth, even within North America, is a big win for society. And you're absolutely right. Software takes, we've dabbled in the creation of some data analytics, and it takes a lot of time, but it just takes an idea as opposed to training a human being to be a pediatrician, which takes 12 years. Okay. So yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think it's phenomenal. I applaud and I am really grateful. And I thank you for the work you're doing. It's really enlightening and it's very much needed in our community.
Thank you.
Sabrina, will you want to wrap it up for us as we're at the end of the hour?
I couldn't say it any better than you. It's been such an honor to have both of you on the show to share with us what you're working on and how important this topic is. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm going to go back to my clinic, the good old stethoscope and my mouth, and ask, what's going on? How can I help you today? Thank you.
I love
Thank
it.
you, everybody.
Go out there, George.
It's been a pleasure meeting you virtually.
Thank you all.
Thank you for listening. This has been a production of the Pediatric Lounge. On the show notes, you will find links to our co-host and other important notes, as well as a timetable of the topics discussed today. Don't forget to follow us on social media and subscribe to wherever you listen to your podcast. Leave us a great review as it helps us greatly. In the meantime, we will see you next week. The Pediatric Lounge. The conversations are not intended as medical advice, and the opinions expressed are solely those of the host and the guest.